Hello again. My name is Reverend Gregory Holston, and this is Just Nation, a show that's about faith, race, and politics and justice here in the city of Philadelphia and across the state. I'm here with some really exciting leaders that are doing great work in Harrisburg today, and I'm just so glad to be a part of the show. We've already had a great dialogue so far, and now hoping for even more of a great dialogue as we talk with each other on camera. Again, I'm here with my co-host, and I will try not to do the father thing. I do it every show, but I will try not to. So Attorney Nia Holston with the Abolitionist Law Center. Thank you again for being here and co-hosting with me.
Okay, it's okay because our viewers have come to expect it. It might as well be a regular occurrence. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. As Reverend Holston stated, my name is Nia Holston. I'm an attorney with the Abolitionist Law Center. And we're just really excited for our conversation that we're going to have today with our esteemed panelists. So let's just get right to it.
So I'm going to start to our left and ask the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about his background.
Sure. So I'm Jordan Harris, State Representative for the 186th Legislative District, which are parts of South and Southwest Philadelphia. So Point Breeze, Grays Ferry, Graduate Hospital, and King Sessing are my neighborhoods. And actually, Senator Saval sitting next to me actually represents part of that district. We overlap. I've been in the legislature, this is 11 years now, my 6th term, and I have the privilege of serving my colleagues in our caucus as the Majority Appropriations Chairman.
So glad that you're here with us, and South Philly in the house.
That's right, South Philly all day.
Thank you.
So I'm Nikhil Saval. I represent the 1st Senatorial District in the Pennsylvania Senate, which is all of Center City, river to river. I have all of South Philly east of Broad Street, and I go up along the river to Fishtown, Kensington, Port Richmond, parts of those neighborhoods, and southwest have FDR Park and a little bit of Packer Park and the Philadelphia Airport and parts of Eastwick. So really the kind of core of the geographic core of Philadelphia, and in the Senate, I'm the minority chair of the Urban Affairs and Housing Committee, and that's a lot of what I work on, have been working on in my 2.5 years in the Senate is housing issues, affordable housing.
Great, so glad to have you.
And on our guests over here, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, so I am Morgan Cephas. I represent the 192nd Legislative District, parts of West Philly. I always like to say it's not the cool parts. I'm not like I'm over there with the trees and the squirrels up close City Avenue.
Just remember, this goes out to them.
Yes, I spent some time in the legislature. We are in our 4th term, yes. Oh gosh, 7 years. We age in dog years, I always like to say. And I am the chair of the Philadelphia delegation, and I also chair the Government Oversight Committee for the House.
Great, and Central High.
261.
All right.
Go Lancers.
I'm Chris Rabb, State Rep in Northwest Philly, the 200th Legislative District, which covers a sliver of Chestnut Hill, all of Mount Airy, the majority of West Oak Lane, and Bluebell Hill. And Maury and I came in together in 2016, and I'm not a fancy leader. I'm a rank and file member, glad to be there. But I'm going into my fourth term, and really excited about being in a new Democratic majority.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So why don't we start with this just basic question. Why did you decide to go into politics? Was it something in your childhood or something experienced? Just share. Why did you make this choice?
I'm a masochist, so. No, I grew up in a very political family, and my biggest role model was my grandma, my mom's mom, and she taught me at a very early age that everything is political. Everything is a political act, even flushing the toilet. And I didn't quite understand what she meant by that. And then she was running for city council years ago in the 80s, and I was just a small boy knocking on doors with her, and she said, You see that over there, those homes over there, they don't have running water. So just knowing that you have a toilet that you can flush gives you a level of political capital that another group may not have.
Wow.
And that really clicked, and that stayed with me for years. And folks in my family for generations who were doing this work really inspired me to serve, because I saw the good that they brought to their community.
Excellent story. Morgan?
Yeah, so growing up in West Philadelphia really made me want to run for office. So, as elected officials always like to talk about, being a product of your zip code. I came from a zip code in West Philly where I had to travel an hour outside of my community to get to Central High School. Had to deal with gun violence at a very early age, exactly what our young people are dealing with today. And I was actually one of those young people that couldn't read by 3rd grade, so I was a hooked on phonics kid, if you can remember hooked on phonics.
Yes, I do. I told it.
But coming back from the University of Virginia, I realized that the community that I left was still in the condition in what I left it. And I had an opportunity to spend some time in local government and city council. And then I worked with the Philadelphia Youth Network that focuses on internships and career-connected workforce development. And I realized as we were advocating for more dollars for summer jobs for young people, there's roughly around 18,000 young people that apply, where we only can afford about 8,000. I realized my work needed to head to Harrisburg so we can, advocate from a point that actually has more resources to support the kids that, we're trying to ensure that they can compete globally.
Yes.
And, one of the things I realized with my district, I'm across the street from Lower Marion High School. So I am reminded, you took that walk with Senator
Yes, I
Hughes,
did.
reminded
Yes, I did.
every day what is at stake, not just for when we were coming up, but being in this position and at the table, being able to change the trajectory for the next generation is critical. So that's why I took the dive.
Wow, that's an inspiring story. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing
okay.
about
Yes.
Representative Harris and how you got
Yeah,
involved.
so I'm actually a political nerd. Like I grew up watching The West Wing. The West Wing was actually one of my favorite shows growing up as a kid.
Why was that your favorite show?
I just love politics. So, watching what, at least fictitiously, what happens in the West Wing was great. Interestingly enough, the Oval Office does not look like it looks on the West Wing. Like I've been privileged to actually take a private tour of the actual West Wing. And it is not as large as it looks on TV. It's actually very small. Like the like Roosevelt Room is like right there, right next to the Oval Office is right there. There's no extra door in the Oval Office. It's a whole lot of different things.
Busting our bubble.
But anyway, that's a whole other tangent. But anyway, I grew up watching shows like that. I was the kid who would run home and my mother I talked to my mother to make sure I was home when the State of the Union address came on. Didn't matter who the president was. Yeah, because I just wanted to hear
At 8 years
Sergeant of
old?
Arms say, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. It was that intense.
Wait, how old were you?
Right.
When I was a kid, like that was what I was into, right? So I was involved in student government and all that kind of stuff. So I always wanted to be involved in politics. But I think what really sparked it for me, though, and sparked my passion for what I do in politics is, I grew up with a black mother, and I would say to my black mama, well, that's not fair. And my mother, like most black moms, will respond and say, life ain't fair.
Yes,
And
indeed. Yes,
I
indeed.
just never liked that. I never liked the whole life ain't fair. What do you mean life ain't fair? And to further that mindset, why isn't it fair? And so for me, running for office was, how do I make life fair? And I'm not saying that things are going to be perfect, but at least if I can't make it fair, how do I make it fairer? So when you talk about criminal justice, how do you make the criminal justice system fair? How do you make our schools fair?
Yes.
Yeah.
When you talk about economic justice, how do you make that fair? You know what I mean? So that maybe the next generation of children, when they're talking to their parents about certain things, that's not the response, that life isn't fair. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, but things could be and should be better. And that just always stuck with me. So I said, you know what? I love my mama, but that is one thing I'm going to try to prove her wrong on to make life fair.
That's great. That's great. Senator?
It's so interesting to hear that, because I was I have to say I was not really interested in politics for a long time. If you had told me up until maybe even a few years ago that I would be involved in politics, even let alone involved in politics at all, let alone run for state senate, or be a state senator, I just wouldn't have believed you. I'm a child of immigrants. My parents are from India. My mother's from the city of Bangalore. My father grew up in a village. You know, they were born. My father's born under the British Empire, right? So they were political in a very deep way. I mean, they grew up in a country that was socialist to some degree. They were ardent Democrats when they moved to the United States, deeply opposed to Nixon and Reagan, and some of that, none of that rubbed off on me. It felt like they had the politics, and ever since I was younger, I wanted to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do, and in fact, I did do that. So in a way, I became a writer, I had an academic background. I just wanted to be involved in literature and writing. The thing that maybe changed that trajectory, and one part of my life began to take over the other, this nascent political side began to take over the others, is the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I was 18, I was actually in college in New York City. I saw, my second week in college, I could see from my dorm window the Twin Towers collapse, actually just down the street. And so you sort of don't see that, and then frankly, from my point of view, see the country's response, which was to invade countries with people that looked like me, frankly, and sort of not be shaken by that. And so I marched against the war and I protested, and that led me to kind of want to find ways of organizing and find ways of being with people together that were powerful. I felt like those moments were powerful for me, and that led me to, when I was in graduate school, to volunteer with the labor movement. I became an researcher, boycott organizer with Unite Here, which is a union that represents hospitality workers. I moved to Philadelphia about 12 years ago, continued to do that work, was involved in fighting budget cuts to the school district. They represent workers in the school district. And I continued to be a writer, but I was also an organizer, and it was difficult to balance all those things. And ultimately, the organizing side of me took over the writing side, and I got involved in politics.
Your mother and father's side took over.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I feel like a lot of lessons that they imparted to me that I didn't quite hear at the time, I'm starting to realize now.
Wow. That's some powerful stories, and just all the different paths of how you got here. I hope people out here hearing this will think about that themselves, that you can come in all kinds of different directions, from different places, from different neighborhoods, from different cities, and come to a place where you care about Philadelphia and you want to see dramatic change here. And I think the amalgamation of all of your experiences coming together can do some powerful work in Harrisburg. So I'm blessed that you shared that with us. Nia, I know you want to share a couple questions as well.
Yeah, so I'm interested in, and thank you all for sharing your stories. They were varied but had similar threads in them as well. I guess I'm interested in how you sort of made that leap from being a person who's generally interested in politics or seeing issues that you want to address, and then getting to the legislature, which, as you have known, has been not democratically controlled for quite some time. And so I guess my question, even though now the House is great, I guess my question is sort of, how do you see that what your work is in light of stagnation, in light of the fact that people are really frustrated with the political system, both at the state level and the federal level, and what do you see as being your interventions in that work? So, why don't we start with Senator Savall?
So how we got from sort of like politics to specifically this like state politics.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean,
in light of the dysfunction that is so present in politics, right?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, I don't know. I'm interested to hear people, my colleagues, but you know, I'm a political optimist, and I'm even a Harrisburg optimist, which is not maybe a paradoxical formulation, but I'm just like
And they get on me about faith.
I guess I thought, I think for state politics, I think it was seeing in part just seeing people I knew get elected. So when I was in 2018, I was a writer, I was a journalist. One of my journalist friends ran for office in South Philadelphia, now Representative Elizabeth Fiedler, and seeing people like that were close to me sort of demystify government sort of made me interested in state government. And then there was another change, I think, around the same time, which is that New York State had basically, they effectively flipped their legislature. They got rid of some Republican voting Democrats, the Independent Democratic Caucus, and suddenly began to pass like climate legislation, tenants' rights legislation, and really move in a dramatic way. And so just seeing all this great stuff being done in state government, frankly, it made me feel like even if we didn't have a Democratic majority, that we should set the agenda, right? We should set the agenda as Democrats, and to the point that when we did achieve it, when we achieve it at least now in one chamber, we had things to move on, and you are seeing some of that, the fruits of that, I think, in the Pennsylvania House, where a flurry of just frankly pent up just energy is just kind of coming forward, and obviously there's challenges, and but I just feel like I really believe that. We can be creative. We can not just be creative together as legislators, but creative in bringing, organized labor, social movements, to bring pressure to bear on our institutions, and create the necessary will to change. Not maybe tomorrow, but soon.
So I heard words like optimism and faith and creativity. Those are words I don't often hear about Harrisburg. Jordan, do you feel the same way?
No, I do. I think I agree in many ways. I think, though, for me, what I saw in Harrisburg and what I just saw in the political space kind of formulated how I wanted to be viewed and how I wanted to be as a legislator. When I got elected almost 11 years ago in the House, we were in the minority, of course, but then over a term or two, we got into a deep minority. Right?
Like 70.
And we got down to like the 80s and high 70s, something like that.
When you see somebody on Democrat, you just go over and hug them because
it was really bad. But I guess for me, I wanted to be an elected official who got to the governor's desk, because what I believe is that my community has seen, and not just my community as in my district, but my community as a whole, our community as a whole, has seen a lot of rhetoric without results. And for me, I wanted to be an elected official who actually got results and did the work necessary to find commonalities with people who I may not have any other similarities with. So when I went to Harrisburg, that was kind of my mindset. So I went and joined caucuses that were maybe ideologically outside of my comfort zone, but I did it because I wanted to meet people who thought differently to me. I think another, honestly, if I'm being honest, another thing is I grew up in Black Philadelphia, but I went to Millersville University for college. And I remember one of the gentlemen who worked in the program that got me into school said, when you see the fall at Millersville, it's mighty white. And he wasn't lying. But I learned a lot at Millersville. I learned how to sit down with folks who don't have the same background and the lived experience that I do, and listen to them and learn from them. That was actually the first time I met, real Republicans. Because if you grew up in Philly, we got Republicans, but they like, you know what I mean? So when I got to Millersville, I literally met real Republicans. So, being able to talk to them, build relationships, spend time together, actually, I believe, helped me go to Harrisburg and do the same with colleagues who literally, 9 out of 10 things we disagree, but on this one thing we agree. And my mindset was, instead of demonizing you, and this is not all of them, because some of them, we serve with some folks, they crazy. And, you know, that it is what it is. But if there's one thing that we do agree on, how do we work that one thing together and actually try to get it done? Because I believe that our community deserved actual and tangible results.
I want you both to answer that question, and I want to follow up with a question that I sent out to all of you about what label would you put on yourself? You know, there's conservative, there's progressive, there's liberal, there's pragmatist.
You take a deep breath.
You know, what label would you put on yourself? And don't say, I don't put no labels on myself.
That was totally my answer.
No, try to put a label on yourself. But I don't want to take away from you both answering Nia's question.
So my dad was Republican, and I voted for Donald Trump Republican. Yes, a black man.
Oh, okay.
And our conversations, he would just always force me to push beyond, big picture, but also push to the point where you're figuring out actually how to get there. And I think that's what I see in Harrisburg. It's just ample opportunity for the challenges that we're dealing with in Philadelphia. And I think, not necessarily looking at it as an uphill battle, because, we don't have the option to fail when we're up in Harrisburg. But we also have to think big, which is some things that, my colleagues come to the table with. And, when you ask what my label is, I would say I'm not Joe Manchin, but I'm also not AOC. I'd like to say I'm, in the middle and pragmatic on what we can accomplish, but also making sure that, as we look at devil in the details, that we're not missing moving a big vision for the city of Philadelphia. So without saying I have a label, I feel like I'm in between those two.
Yeah. Some people call that a moderate.
Well, see, when I would say I was a moderate, they would immediately think Joe Manchin. And I'm like, okay, well,
Joe
I'm definitely
is
not
not.
that. Definitely not that.
Oh,
On
Lord.
his best day.
Right.
Not a moderate.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I appreciate both spectrums of our tent. One, because I feel like the progressives, have bold and big ideas on, what equity looks like, what inclusion looks like, what does a Philadelphia that we all want looks like. I think the Joe Manchins of the world is how do we get there? And I feel like finding somewhere in between is what we need to do while we're up in Harrisburg, because again, we have members of our own Democratic caucus that are Joe Manchin-esque.
Yes.
But again, we don't have the option to fail in Philadelphia because of the significant opportunities that we have right now with the level of transition, the amount of leadership that we have in both chambers. And if we could just come together, maintain that bold vision, but also figure out how we get there and bring as many along as possible, I think, we'd be all the better.
Excellent.
Oh, label?
Yes.
I mean,
and answer Nia's about how you kind of move to the...
Yeah, because they're highly related to me. Because I think how I see myself transcends the kind of trendy label of progressive, which just brings up a lot of issues, certainly around racial politics. So, I mean, that is the label that has been ascribed to me the most, but it doesn't quite fully sit well with me. So I'm not actually sure what other label. I mean, I'm a troublemaker.
That's a label. That's a label.
That's the origin of my name. It's Rab. It's short from rabble rouser. They just shrunk it. You like that? I almost got y'all. Y'all see that? See my great grandfather.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You
but
didn't get me.
I didn't get you. So, but the connection to your question is some constituent of mine. Well, we are fellow Democratic committee people in 2015. And she said, well, you know, Sherelle Parker's going to be vacating her seat to run for city council. You should run for that open seat. And I'm like, why do you hate me? She said, you want to send me 100 miles for my babies. I had 2 young sons at the time. And you want to send me to be in the belly of the beast with Republican-controlled houses. Why do you wish that fate on me? That's not nice. Like, I thought you liked me. And, you know, I was kind of flippant about it. I'm like, whatever. And she kind of kept pushing me. And then I had this moment, and it was deep. I kind of felt like the breath of my ancestors on the back of my neck. And it just kind of grounded me. Like, boy, who are you to turn up your nose to serve your community? Like, all the things I've been blessed with in my life were all born of struggle over generations. Folks giving up so much and not even going back that far, which you know I can do as a genealogy nerd. But I'm just talking about my own father was born in Shelbyville, Kentucky in 1932, who was the son, the only child of 2 Fisk graduates who, his dad was a physician, and black physicians in Shelbyville, Kentucky, what you called them was boy. That's what you called a black doctor in the 1930s. And my father had to listen to illiterate white teenagers at a department store call his father boy, and his father had to swallow it. Because even a twitch in his face could have gotten him lynched. And the things that they sacrificed, just basic dignity, to get ahead, not just for themselves, because they didn't have a lot of wealth, but they were educated. And they served in their own ways. And it got me to a point where my brother and I were able to have a good life and not have to worry about many of the things that those people who came before did. And so when I thought about the opportunity again with some humility and some perspective, and I said, I know really well how to operate in the belly of the beast. I graduated from Yale in 1992 when all the stuff around political correctness was coming up and Western civilization, all the fights about multiculturalism and just awful, awful, rampant racism. And I was able to graduate in 4 years with my dignity, a sense of purpose, and identity. And I said, if I can do that, I can do anything. And so I said, you know, maybe I am the right person for this job. And I didn't necessarily think I was going to win, but I was going to sure as hell, you know, do my best, and I accidentally won.
There's a few folk that might disagree with accidentally.
Right.
But,
I seem to remember the campaign.
Yeah.
I have another follow-up question.
Sure. Did we get your label though?
We didn't get their labels.
Oh yeah, let's get those. Let's get those.
I mean, I'm a socialist. I would say that's my label. I'm a democratic socialist, and I feel, but at the same time,
What's that mean?
Yeah. So what does it mean? I mean, for me, I feel like it's helpful for me to identify like the sources of it, like why I came to it. I mean, for me, obviously the labor movement we talked about, you know, that my involvement in that, but reading and thinking, I was really transformed by the prison letters of George Jackson. If people read that great book, Soledad, brother. That's my socialism, if that makes sense. Like the socialism that comes, or like the letters to Angela Davis. In a way, that led me back the kind of literature of black radicalism in the 60s, because it also covered the third world. People were interested in what was going on in India. People were it led me back to India in a way that, or what was going on in China. And fundamentally, it was just like, how do we as a society treat our worst off? How do we treat people who are in prison? How do we what are the conditions inside? What does that reveal about our entire system of government? And I think to me it was reading that just felt like we need a deep transformation. We have deep inequalities. We have deep inequalities that are structural in part to the founding of this country, in part structural to the economic system that is implicated in it, and we need to change it. But that said, I also feel like the other label that goes along with that is, and I don't know if I would, it just is organizer, because I feel like I also feel pragmatic, despite a label that feels like, could be off-putting to many people. I feel like in Harrisburg, partly Republicans probably see all of us as socialists to some degree. They don't really make those distinctions. And then the other thing is just like wanting to feel like, I agree, Rep. Harris and I remember we had lunch early on when I first started, and it's been a great mentor to me, in part just wanting to be able to be like, well, how do we put this thing into action, right? Like, how do we do it? How do we do it with the right people? How do we do it the right way and still bring the thing home, right? And when if you're an organizer, you don't presume that the answer is no to something that you want to fight for. You have to build with everyone, or as many people as possible. You have to build a broad coalition. So I feel like all of those things are constitutive of socialism.
Wow.
Understand.
That's very powerful, very powerful. I know Rep. Harris, you have to leave, but I want you to get that last comment in around what's your label. I said you cannot leave.
So here's, y'all might not like this answer, but my label is probably going to be black man. And the reason why I say that is because I believe that being a black man from Philadelphia and living in America, you actually could possibly weave into a lot of different boxes depending on the topic. Because I believe that the life experience and just the role of a black man in this city and in this country is bigger than the Democratic Party, it's bigger than the Republican Party, it's bigger than any of these labels. My lived experience has given me a view on things that are just different in different ways. So I don't necessarily know which one of those terms I could actually say as a black man, because when I come to politics, I don't come to it as a progressive Democrat or a moderate Democrat. I come to it as a black man who represents the guys who look like me, who, I'm Rep. Harris in this suit, but if I go throw on my sweatsuit and I stand on the corner, I look just like any other brother from the community, any other brother who could be harassed by the police, any other brother who could be shot and killed, any other brother who could have gone to a failing school. You know what I mean? But also any other brother who could have gone to Yale, who could have gone to Millersville, and done a whole variety of things. You know what I mean? So for me, and I don't want, it's like, I'm not trying to give a cop-out answer because, people don't like to put you in a box. No, I'm not. I'm not. Because, and here's why I say that. Because I can identify with being a black man. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what a progressive means. Because when I look up the definition of progressive, I would actually say that changing some of the systems the way I want to change them is actually progressive.
That's what you say.
You know what I mean?
If that's what you feel.
But wait. When you look at my body of work, though, some people would say, oh, because of where he is on this and where he is on that, that's not progressive. But if the
Clean slate is a... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, Clean slate is very progressive.
Yeah.
I've never been called a progressive. Seriously, respectfully.
Yeah.
One of the largest criminal justice reform bills to come out of Harrisburg in probably the last decade, which is now a national model, was one of my signature pieces of legislation, right? If you talk to most groups, they would tell you that this is a big deal. It's a progressive idea. And I've never been called a progressive. I've never been called a progressive. That's why I say I can identify more with saying, look, I'm just a black man who is trying to do things that I believe will change the existence for the better of black men, black women, poor people that have the same either experience or similar life experience to me.
But what if there are other black men that disagree with you? I mean, there are lots of black men from South Philadelphia who may come out with differing perspectives. And so I guess I'm just curious to where you find that your own personal politics are coming into play versus, what you may be representing as a black man, generally speaking. Because that can take a lot of different tacks. It can take, I'm voting for Donald Trump. It can take,
I know black men that did that.
It can take, I'm abolishing the prison system, right? And so I in sort of response to what you're saying, I do think there's this idea of it's so important. Your lived experience is so important. My lived experience is so important. But what does that mean? And what does that mean when it comes to the legislation that you're putting in?
So for me, a lot of it means, and you're right, that a lot of black men, like if you go to my barbershop, like you are right, there are some brothers who voted for Donald Trump. And here's the thing.
And you want to abolish prisons.
100% agree. I don't look at it as they voted for I don't look at it as the outcome. For me in that barbershop, it's the reasoning. And I feel like that is a big part of the foundation on why I do things, is sitting in that barbershop to gather the reasoning on why some brothers are doing certain things. What I've surmised from being in the barbershop, you know, being at the 22nd Street Cafe, also being in my church on Sunday, is that a lot of those lived experiences are similar, right? What that results in may be different. So you could talk to a brother who voted for Donald Trump and talk to a brother who voted for Joe Biden, and when you talk to them, they may have similar experiences and similar views, but how that is manifested may be different. So I spend my time in that barbershop listening and understanding and using that to help me formulate how I do my politics. I use that to formulate what is of importance to my community. I use that to be the representative in the sense that I don't have a monopoly on good ideas, but a lot of times what I found out from being in elected office is that sometimes you can become detached because you spend so much time in City Hall or in Harrisburg or in Washington, D.C., that when you come back to the neighborhood and just sit there, you're not really thinking or saying the similar things that the people that you represent are saying. So when I say I'm a black man, I say it from a space of, this is my lived experience, but these are the folks that I sit and talk to and try to gauge and understand why they're saying, what they're feeling, what they're going through, and using that to fuel the work that I ain't never been to prison. I ain't never been arrested. But what I did know is that my brothers who went to school with me couldn't get jobs because of their criminal records. That's what fueled Clean Slate for me. It wasn't a policy paper. It wasn't, you know, I saw this on TV and I thought this was a good idea. It was like, no, dudes coming up to me like, Jordan, can you help me out with a job? You know, the first question I got to ask them, do you got a record? I mean, you do this work, so I'm preaching to the choir. So but that's a question, it's a realistic question that shouldn't have to be asked. So that was the fuel. When the kill came, and I'm quite honest, but when the kill came to me and we started talking about whole home repairs, you know, we were eating sushi downtown. Remember that? It was real good. It was a really good spot. The food pretty good.
You know, they say black men don't eat sushi.
Oh, well, it's black men. I'm with you. I eat sushi.
I love
Tear it
sushi.
up.
But here's the thing. When he came to me, he told me about this concept. I'm like, you know what? That makes sense. But why does it make sense? It makes sense because my lived experience talked to me about the lady who lived in my district whose water was shut off by the water department because she couldn't afford to get the piece fixed. So the water department literally had to shut her water off, right? And what I knew about that lady is that if somebody said, here's $25,000, she would sell her house, although her house might be worth $150,000. And that's how you get rid of transfer of generational wealth, is that people are selling their homes not because they're getting rich, but because they can't afford to maintain them. So when the kill came to me and said, how about we provide money for people to be able to fix it? I'm remembering all of the stories of the people that I've interacted with. I'm remembering my own mother. You know what I mean? So that's when I say I'm a black man, that's what I mean. I mean, I use those experiences of my life to try to help guide my politics.
So people call that, I'm not saying you're that, but people call that being pragmatic.
Okay.
That's what they call it. and I don't think, I think, you know, only reason we talking this label piece is just to kind of get an understanding of what we value. So to hear all of what you value, which is interesting, he said organizing, a lot of that was organizing.
Definitely.
listening to the people, and then I'm actually responding to what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
That is organizing.
And building the movement to bring them into
Yeah.
politics, to bring their voices and experiences into politics. Because that's the interesting thing about this conversation. You know, I heard you earlier mention a pragmatism. I heard the word moderate was thrown out. I'm not going to assign that to anybody. But I do think some of the most pragmatic stuff that I've heard today has been from Senator Saval and Representative Rabb, and when they're talking about organizing, right? And they're talking about building that movement over time, particularly looking at what the New York State House is able to do, and even though they've, been attacked by that, right? So I just think it's really, really interesting. There's a lot of gray areas in all of this.
So I want to say this one point. I know Jordan still has to scoot for a minute, but so I think key things about labels is that progressives usually associated with a big vision. Pragmatic is associated with getting stuff done. A big vision or a big vision without pragmatism often is failure. You have a big idea up in the sky and it doesn't do anything to change anybody's life. But a pragmatic view without a vision.
That's right.
And I think that's why I think the both
Yes.
make it so powerful for us.
Yes,
in
that's what I'm hearing.
Harrisburg.
I'm hearing the team. That's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing with different roles being played and different perspectives coming. As long as you're respecting each other, this team can come together in a way that can come together with a whole home repair vision, with a strategy that's pragmatic, that gets folk and gets stuff done.
Right.
And to view each other with that kind of respect for each other's role, that you're going to go to Jordan, you're going to hear a certain perspective about we got to get stuff done. And that you better come with your vision, your big vision, with I know Jordan's going to ask me how we're going to get this done. So let me think about that. Same here, you hear anybody here really with a big vision. I know Rab has plenty with judiciary stuff, and Bergen has plenty of stuff with all the Philadelphia delegation work. Then the question then becomes, they come with the big vision. The other question is, how can I get it done? So I'm saying this is a team, and if you value one another and respect one another, we can really move forward in this city together. And so that's what excites me. I'm just hearing it. I got excited. I know you got to go. And this excited to hear that you all have slots on the team. You all have roles that you can play.
Well, let him go so I can talk about him after he leaves. Because what I'm going to say about him behind his back is what I don't say enough to his face, is that we are put in these buckets and these categories, and often folks on the outside want to say, why are you all, and like they don't understand that at the end of the day, we are very much a team that has issues that we have different perspectives and tactics and such and priorities, but we want the same things, and finding those commonalities is really important. And if you're on the sidelines, you have the luxury of being a purist and say, oh, well, that person didn't vote right on it. I mean, if I just follow what people say about me on Instagram, I'm like the devil. And you focus on, you cherry pick on the negative things. But the example of the senator and the rep around whole home repairs is the best of both worlds. A highly pragmatic state rep. That is his reputation. And a highly progressive democratic socialist who has a concept, and they come together to do something that Republicans supported.
Yes.
And that is the power. And I think the more we find the things that bring us together, and you're really good at that, the better off we are. But we have to tell that narrative. We have to explain that to folks who want to pit us against each other and want to have these purity tests. And it's no good. And I find that has been the challenge on the left, is that, oh, well, if she didn't vote the right way, then, she's somehow not to be trusted or respected or worked with. We can't do that. We can't govern in that way, and we shouldn't.
Yeah, I'm curious what you all think. I mean, I would say that one of the biggest kind of surprises, personal surprises to me about Harrisburg, is I think I had a certain idea of who would be my friends and who I would work with, and I mean, honestly, I thought, on the left, I'm a socialist, so I'm gonna, I'm gonna have a lot of like lefty friends, and we're gonna just kind of be together. And of course, I do have lefty friends, let's be clear. But the action, like in terms of like some of my closest relationships and the folks, I work with, it's not at all the case. Like it's actually, and I've like developed deep relationships, and the people I kind of need to talk to, I'm like, I have this, what I need to work this out, like, are not, it's like, it's a much wider range, and I just feel like that's honestly been part of my optimism about Harrisburg, is just like, that actually we can, like, figuring that out, and, and figuring out who you work with and how you do it.
When you go up to Harrisburg, the Republicans aren't putting us in those silos.
Yeah.
We are all progressives.
Right.
We are all
It's
And,
true. There's no nuance.
coming out of Philadelphia, I mean, we might have our own, factions down here, and, the media definitely plays a role in that. And, I think, once again we get up there, we're all Philadelphians. And I think it, works to both of our benefits with, again, some of us being pragmatic, some having a bold vision. It's like when you bring it together, we're inching things closer to improving Philadelphia. So I think it works. But again, on the outside, you would think that, we're disjointed. But, when we go up there, we're working constantly together on, a sole focus, which is Philadelphia.
Great. We only have a few minutes left, and we didn't talk anything about some of the main issues that are happening in the next month here in Harrisburg. And this has been taped a little bit earlier, so actually the session will be over by the time you're listening to this. But talk a little bit about what your vision for this year getting done in the budget. And we only have about 7-8 minutes left. Actually 15 minutes, 14 minutes. All right, let's do it.
In that case. Well, now you're putting us in this spot because when this is recorded, it will already be done, so we have to have some prognostication.
Yeah,
I'm not so good at that.
You can look really good now.
No, we
a
got some
month
good
from
stuff
now.
that's going to come down the
really
pipe.
That's true. All right, then why don't you lead in the
right.
Yeah,
Well, as you can imagine, top three things coming out of, just as the delegation chair, one is, of course, to address minimum wage.
Yes.
And, we can have we can take up the entire 15 minutes to
Yes,
talk
we
about
could.
minimum wage as to where we are. But I think in this climate, we will definitely move the needle. How far we'll move it. I know as the delegation, we asked for $18 an hour or remove preemption. Obviously, we have Republicans that aren't really in favor for that, but I do think we'll move the needle this time around. What that number looks like, what it's tied to COLA inflation will be up to the discussions that we'll have over the next couple of weeks, but I do think we'll be able to come home with a higher minimum wage than what we have now. So I think that priority number one, obviously investments in education. My colleague Liz Fiedler, she had been leading the charge on school facilities dollars, and I think we will, make a significant investment in that. You had the court case that happened around education. We really want to make. I mean, obviously not fixing the entire system into perpetuity, but making that first down payment is going to be significant this budget cycle. So I do definitely see that happening. And I think not the last thing, but one of, again, our top priorities, as you can imagine, in Philadelphia is still dealing with the gun crisis that we have and the criminal element that's happening here in Philadelphia. So making sure that not just putting, the investments through PCCD with individual organizations, but, having this administration, be more place-based, more targeted in our approach and with our investments that don't just go to neighborhood anti-violence organizations, but go to, investing in communities to, remove blight and to move communities along the economic spectrum to provide for opportunity because, gun violence is a byproduct of the lack of investment that we've experienced over decades. And I think uniquely looking at how we approach gun violence from multiple perspectives, you'll definitely see that down payment this budget cycle.
Excellent, excellent. Anybody else want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to piggyback on the last point around gun violence, clearly a public health crisis, and how there's an opportunity to address it in multiple ways. And one of the ways that I'm really hoping to make some progress on with my colleagues is going to the root. And that is, how do the guns get to Philly to begin with? And so one of the things I've been working closely with the Lieutenant Governor's office and others is going after those bad faith gun dealers, the majority of whom are not in Philly or Pittsburgh or what have you, but they're in the collar counties.
Yes.
They're outside of the city where folks are going and making straw purchases, coming in, selling or giving under duress those guns to folks who couldn't get it legally. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. If you doubled the police force, you could not address the issue through policing. If you start, this is what I believe Desmond Tutu said. You can pull the bodies out of the river, but you need to go upstream to see why they've fallen in to begin with. And that approach to gun policy is something that we haven't spent enough time on, and it's something that I think will produce bipartisan support if you steer clear of Second Amendment issues. And you just focus really probably on the 1% of gun dealers. And by the way, there are more gun shops in Pennsylvania than Starbucks. A lot of people don't know that. And they do not get inspected regularly because there are only 1,500 ATF agents in the entire country in the field. And there's over 4,000 gun dealerships here in Pennsylvania alone. So that's something that I think could get bipartisan support because the research shows that if you go after the worst of the worst gun dealers and just even the threat of them being inspected, you know what they do? They shut down. They shut down, which has a material connection to the number of homicides that happen in our city.
Excellent, excellent. Senator?
I share the concerns of my colleagues. I think those are all major budget priorities. I think overwhelmingly the going to the root of the gun violence issue, problem in our city, in epidemic, public health issue, which is at so many different ways. One way to tackle the gun violence problem is, and it's shown through research, is through home repairs, right? And we know that it's just true that there's been a lot of research to this effect, but of course it makes sense that if you stabilize a community, if you make if you make it possible for a block to be vital, and it will have effects. It will have effects, and so we did the whole home repairs program. Our colleagues and I, and Rep. Harris who left was such a critical part in getting that done. It was one-time dollars, right? It was $125 million. It's working across the state. It's going to, it's opening here in Philadelphia in a month or so. We need to continue it. We need to have recurring, sustainable funding because, in 5 years, we could say we've repaired, some 50,000 homes across the state of Pennsylvania. We could say, and there's a workforce component, right? You will have trained dozens and hundreds of workers who are then going back to their communities, repairing homes in their communities. That's what we want to see. And so, I'm hopeful that the governor signaled his support to grow the program for many years to come in his budget address. We need to find the sources for that, and I think so. That's a big priority.
Yeah, so I'm thankful because we're talking about gun violence, but minimum wage, raising minimum wage reduces gun violence. Home repairs reduces gun violence. Education, schools not being toxic, all reduce gun violence. And so really becomes a gun violence plan, a gun violence strategy by making major investments in our communities. I will make one more statement about the minimum wage, and just we have about 40% of Black Philadelphia is living below the poverty line. 25% for the whole city, about 40% for Black folk, about 40% for children. About 70% are either below the poverty level or just above the poverty level. Raising the minimum wage can move so many of those folk who are in that 40% above the poverty level and literally move them out of poverty just with one piece of legislation. And our ability to continue to do that over the next several years can keep them out of poverty. So while all of these issues are powerful and important, that minimum wage piece, which hasn't happened in so long, is the most effective way to move people out of poverty, and the city of Philadelphia desperately needs it.
And it's not just about going up, it's about going out,
Yes.
because what I remind folks is when the federal law was enacted 75 years ago, it explicitly, or not
Yeah.
explicitly, it intentionally
Yes, intentionally.
excluded black and brown folk and women, agriculture workers, domestic workers.
Yes.
And today, if you're a gig worker, you don't,
make it, yeah.
you're not in there. If you're an incarcerated worker, the most celebrated job on the inside is training service animals for disabled vets. What is more honorable, what is more dignified work, what's more meaningful work than that in any space, inside or out? It's $1.49 an hour. And neurodivergent folk, they don't get access to the minimum wage either. So if we're bringing people up, can we bring more people with them? So, that's part of my bill that I would love to be able to talk about, because if we exclude folks who are the most marginalized, we're missing a real opportunity, and it's the right thing to do, and it helps local communities, it helps so many things.
Well, one thing that I hear in just what you said, and I appreciate so much of what everyone has said, I think about geriatric parole. So we talked a little bit about this prior to filming, but you talk about the work that's celebrated on the inside. I know one of the informal employment on the inside that a lot of people do is mentorship. And we're missing so many mentors who are not in our communities,
That's right.
and who want to come back and do that work and share what they have learned and share their insight, their incredibly valuable insight with so many young people across the city of Philadelphia, and are not able to. And so when we talk about gun violence and we talk about these different these root causes
That's right.
and effects, we have to talk about that as well, and how so many of our elders across the state of Pennsylvania come from Philadelphia and then are just spread out, right? And we're missing that, and so I think it's important to bring that up as well. And I'm curious. None of you said geriatric parole was one of the priorities, but that's definitely something that. Definitely important as well.
There's certainly the entire criminal justice
Right.
Package that needs to be put together, but and I guess that should be a part of how you carve all of that out during this time period, and particularly during this budget. I mean, because really the tough stuff that the Republicans may not want to do is the budget time is for that, because you can get it in the budget, you can compromise in some other area and get a bill done because they got something in the budget they wanted. I know my friend Senator Hughes always said to me this way, there's 1 minute left, and so I'm gonna close. I'm gonna do the closing. He said, he used to say to me, Rev, just get me one of these. Give me a House or give me the Senate. Just give me one. Give me one, and I can negotiate just about anything in a conference setting. I can be able to do that. Give me one of them, and I can be able to deliver on fair funding for our schools. I can deliver on minimum wage. Give me one. I'm saying this on TV. I know if he...
When did he say that? That's amazing. I'm so excited.
When we were marching down and going to Lower Marion, I think that's when he said it. We were all, it was 90 degrees outside. Maybe he was.
Well, listen, we got a chamber.
But we got one chamber, and these excellent folk, these excellent people that I hope you see today are really a team working together, are going to do great and wonderful things in Harrisburg. We're believing that. This is Just Nation. Thank you again for watching. Take care, everybody. See you next time.